What is going on, everybody, and welcome to episode 89 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast for a special Tuesday episode. I'm your host, Kyle Roscoe, and what a fun and really kind of challenging card we have for you guys tonight as Horseshoe Indianapolis takes the center stage as they have their Indiana Oaks and Indiana Derby card. There's, I think, 8 total stakes out of 12 races. And there's 2 graded races, which is both the Indiana Oaks and the Indiana Derby. It's an absolutely fantastic, extremely fun card and an extremely challenging puzzle. I would say almost all of the stakes races, there's very little separation from a lot of the contenders in these races, which makes for a very good betting Saturday. Again, welcome in everyone. Thank you guys all so much for joining the show. If you're on YouTube or on X, please come on over to YouTube. It's our main source of content, of course. Please go down below the video player, hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. It's the 2 easiest and best ways to help out our channel, because not only will it show us that you guys are enjoying the content, but it will show us, it'll show us and help out our channel as it will push these videos out into the YouTube algorithm to hopefully bring like-minded horse players like yourself to the HHH Racing Podcast. And of course, for that, we thank you. Also, scrolling around the bottom of the screen right now, you'll see the net due to the 4th of July week. Obviously, you guys are seeing us on Tuesday instead of Wednesday and half an hour earlier to accommodate some of our co-hosts. But you'll see Saturday, there's no Picks and Ponies show during the week. It's actually going to be live Saturday morning for Belmont Stars and Stripes Saturday. They have a great card over there. And because Wednesday is going to be, everyone has the 4th of July off. So, we don't want to interrupt you guys' family time, whether you guys are traveling to some kind of lake house, traveling to be with friends, or just staying at home with your family. We don't want to impede on anything like that. So Picks and Ponies will go Saturday morning at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, talking about Belmont Stars and Stripes Saturday card. Again, fantastic card. Not going to want to miss that. So Saturday morning, grab a coffee, sit down, have some breakfast, and watch the Picks and Ponies guys go over that for Saturday. As of course, Horsin around. If you guys don't know, we have a shows Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, covering the recap of the last weekend stakes action and what we talked about. And not only you guys have the chance to be on there, but we also talked about contest plays and everything surrounding the Hawthorne contests over the weekend. Howard and myself, that was yesterday. Please go watch that show if you haven't already after Bettin N Boozin tonight. If you're more of an audio listener or you just want to rate and review and help us out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor is not only where we post every single episode of Bettin N Boozin, but every single episode that's posted to the HHH Racing Podcast in audio form. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Anchor. Again, please go rate, review, and subscribe. Big announcements, guys. This is so not only do we have the normal power picks that have been profitable for over 2.5 years for only $4 a weekend. You get 2 full tracks every single Saturday, pick 5 grid, spot plays, price plays, everything you need to be successful on a Saturday. We have you covered. Again, one of the most affordable and profitable tip sheets on all of YouTube for only $4 a weekend. But not only do we have the normal power picks, we now are launching, just like we did last year, guys. If you guys were fans of the podcast last year, new Saratoga and Del Mar power picks are going to now be available starting right now. And I'm going to bring it up and show you guys what it looks like on the website as I click over to it right now. You'll see it pop up on the screen right now to the right. I'll put it full screen. So this is the normal HHHRacingPodcast.com. If you guys don't know, we have a fantastic website that Pete Visco puts together of Picks and Ponies. He shows previous editions of power picks, everything you want to learn about us, special appearances coming up, and all things HHH Racing Podcast. But you'll see power picks tip sheet right here. And not only does it have the standard power picks now, it has Saratoga only and Del Mar only. If you click that, bring it to the Saratoga only power picks, you'll see what's included with your subscription, guys. It's full card ABC grids, top 3 picks for every single race on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So, it says full meet at the bottom, but these are going to be sent out Friday through Sunday. So I know Saratoga races Wednesday and Thursday during the week or during the summer meet, but we're going to be covering the power picks Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. But you'll get vertical, horizontal plays, price plays, just like you do with the normal power picks tip sheet. You'll get it included for every single Saratoga day, Friday through Sunday this summer. And how do you pay for it? Super easy, guys. So you'll either send it directly through PayPal. You see Howard's hkravitzhorse@gmail.com is the email. You can use PayPal. And please be sure to select the friends and family option when they're sending, so there's no fee for either the sender or the receiver. Or you can send the cost of the subscription to Howard directly using Venmo. These are your subscription options, guys. For those that subscribe to the Power Picks, you have Saratoga only full meat. So you buy it all in once and you'll get every single Friday, Saturday, and Sunday card for the entire Saratoga meet for $95. And that breaks it down. I mean, Saratoga has almost 9 weekends times 3. I mean, you break it up. It's very, very little if you buy the annual meet per card. It's like a couple dollars a card. It's actually a very, very good deal for what we're giving you guys. And this is a one-time purchase at a discounted rate for the current Power Pick subscribers. And if you want to try it out before you want to buy full meat, it will be a little bit more expensive if you do it by weekly, but $16 for current Power Pick subscribers is the price. However, if you're not a Power Pick subscriber, 1, what are you doing? But 2, it's going to be a little bit more expensive. The full meat goes up to $125 if you just want the specific Saratoga Power Picks, and weekly it is $19.99 for non-Power Pick subscribers. And again, that can be sent through PayPal, hkravitzhorse@gmail.com, sending through the friends and family option, or Venmo at Howard-Kravitz. And also, not only Saratoga, we have Del Mar Power Picks this year, and written by West Coast bias himself, Noah Maher. Obviously, you guys know if you follow Bettin N Boozin a lot, you know how successful Noah is on the West Coast. It's what he mains in. He's based in West Coast. Obviously, he goes to the University of Kentucky now, but is fully based out in California, so he knows these tracks like the back of his hand. So he will be writing them again every Friday, Saturday, Sunday, exactly the same thing. To buy those, the full meet individual weeks for current Power Pick subscribers and non-Power Pick subscribers are completely the same, but you'll get the same exact benefits to the Saratoga only Power Picks, of course, just for Del Mar now. So guys, go on to HHHRacingPodcast.com and get your Power Pick subscription today. Again, fantastic information for every single Friday, Saturday, and Sunday throughout the summer for both East and West Coast. But guys, that's enough blabbing from me. Let's bring on our co-host and let's get right into this very challenging and very interesting pick 5 at Horseshoe Indianapolis from the Ohio State University, now obviously in Chicago for the summer, Charlie Freeman, and from University of Kentucky, now who the hell knows where he is based on the background, Noah Maher. Boys, what's up?
What's up, Charlie? I haven't talked to you in a while. How's it going?
Yeah, good. It looks like you're almost doing the betting and snoozing to pay honor to me, but I guess you chose to not sit in the bed.
I'm actually in between the beds, so I don't know what you would call that.
Usually when you're in between we're going past that. Either way, guys, thank you guys all for joining in. Guys, thanks for joining me tonight. It'll be a fun card. Let's go to the chat real quick, then we'll move on. Katie, of course, is here. Jim Pillards is here. Dewey Fan is here. Dewey, thanks so much for that. Dewey, we're not doing one for that Saturday. It's going to be Howard, Pete, and Paul covering it Saturday morning, as I touched on. So that's going to be at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, like I said. So we won't be doing it, but Howard and them will be covering it. Racing Downwind is here. Nathan Woodward, what's up, my friend? Thanks for joining on YouTube this time. And hopefully I see you out at Horseshoe Indy. I know we talked about that. And Equine Edge, I think this is Oldie. Oldie, thanks so much, man, for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. For those that don't know, Howard actually announced something in the works with Equine Edge. Hopefully we can partner with them soon. Fantastic guys over there with Scotty McKeever and all those guys. Hopefully we can continue a good partnership soon. Jim Pillards, like I said, Todd Harmon. Yeah, and trust me, we'll get to it. We're going to cover those very quickly outside of the late pick 5. But he says, I'm curious to find out if Charlie's going back to the well with me and Mr. C in one of those races. I'm going to take a wild guess and say probably, but we'll see when we get there. Mike Sled is here, of course. Chris Walsh is here. Thanks so much. He says power picks are great value. Again, $4 a weekend. Chris Walsh, man, thanks so much for joining the show. Greatly appreciate it. Keith is here. He said just purchased Saratoga entire meat. Keith, I don't think I've seen your name in our chat before, so thanks so much for joining in. Mark Bogas is here. And Greg Boyd is here. Looking forward to Saturday. Absolutely, Greg. Hopefully I'll see you as well. I will, and I kind of threw the cat out of the bag, but I will be going to Indiana, Horseshoe Indianapolis this Saturday. I'll actually be going with my dad. So we're going to go play. There's actually a good NHC contest that they have every single year. Going to play that. But look, it's a fantastic time. And if you guys are going to be out at Horseshoe Indianapolis, I would love, buy you a beer or do whatever. But hopefully I can meet some of you guys if you guys are going. James, of course, Jays is here. Looking for the show. Appreciate that, James. Thanks so much for joining. And Steven Vanderbrook, good evening, all. And he didn't say smash the like button this time, though. So, Steven, I don't know, man. But we got to smash. Oh, did he? There it is. See, I knew it. Got a good catch by Noah. But Steven Vanderbrook, of course, very astute. Please help us out and smash that like button. Guys, I've taken a little bit of time with the power picks discussion, so let's get right into it here. I'm going to go over real quick the stakes that are outside the late pick 5. I feel like I'll just at least need to do some due diligence to bring them up because, again, Horseshoe has 8 total stakes on this card. Some of them Indiana bred stakes, some of them open companies, and they're all equally as hard to handicap. And you'll see I'll bring up right now, race 4 is the first stakes race on the card. It's the Mary Holman George Memorial Handicap. $100,000 going a mile in the 16th for fillies and mares 3 years old and up. Draws a field of 7. Morning line favorite is the 7-5. Loved for Florent Giroux and Brendan Walsh. Second choice, Hidden Connection for Brett Calhoun and Brian Hernandez, who's coming in to ride some horses later in the card. And third choice is the number 5, Traverse for Riley Mott and in invading Mike Smith, which I actually thought was really interesting to see him come out to Horseshoe for this day. And again, I won't be showing PPs for this races, but this is honestly one of them, probably the most straight, at least in my opinion, the most straightforward race. I really liked Loved in this spot based on pace scenarios. She looks to have the lead on her own, and she's very fast out of the gate. Hidden Connection's also fast, but as Hidden Connection's gotten a little bit older, she's tended to be a little bit slower out of the gate. So I really liked Loved in the spot. I really like Loved in this spot to take them all the way on the front end. Traverse is interesting as well. Going to stalk off the pace. Might not be good enough to challenge for the win with the 1 and the 6, but I think it's interesting at least underneath. And Blue Light Special, the Indiana bred for Cipriano Contreras at 6-1, I think is also interesting for that same type of underneath play. But for me, when I was on my early initial look, it looked like Loved. Again, no pun intended. I love her in this spot, hopefully taking them all the way in the Mary Holman George Memorial Handicap. Race number 6, guys, is the next stakes race on the card. It's the Jonathan B. Schuster Memorial Stakes. This is a mile and 16th on the turf with the returning everyone's favorite horse on Bettin N Boozin, me and Mr. C. You see him on the outside, the 11 horse, the Florida bred for Maker and Santana. Master of Foxhounds, Noah, I thought was a really interesting one coming over for D'Amato at 7-2. That's going to actually be your morning line favorite. Second choice is the number 2 on the inside, or sorry, number 1 on the inside, Runaway Storm for Alex Achard and Ethan West. Third choice is the 5-1 number 2, Gray's Fable, Brian Hernandez and Mike Stidham. I actually went Gray's Fable in this race, guys. Runaway Storm I thought was really interesting. Gray's Fable is 9. Runaway Storm I really like in this race. It's just a matter of the layoff for him. But if he can piece it together, Ethan West is decent off layoffs, but nothing too insane to write home about. But if Runaway Storm is ready based on the works, he looks pretty good on paper. It's just a matter of can he put it together. But Gray's Fable's still running really, really nice races. And just based on the trip I think Gray's Fable can get, I think at 5-1, 5-1 is a fair enough price to get on Brian Hernandez and Stidham. It's just a matter of can the horse continue to do it at 9 years old, of course. Anything below 5-1, by the way, I would not take on Gray's Fable. Me and Mr. C is interesting. I just think he's going to be a little bit too far back in this spot. I don't think there's enough speed to get horses that are going to be coming away from the clouds, as me and Mr. C has continued to do. Charlie, I don't know if you looked at this race, but I feel like people need to hear your opinion on this, on me and Mr. C. Did you look at this race at all yet, or are you going to give your opinion on Saturday?
No, of course, yeah. As soon as I saw the name of the program, of course I looked. Look, I'll be honest. I handicapped all the stakes races, as you were kind of touching on, not just the ones we covered. I think this is the most wide open race in the entire card. I think the morning line kind of shows that as well. Now, I do know, two of the horses that I thought were kind of interesting in this race, and Money Supply and Injunction, are cross-entered into a race that we will be covering. But outside of those two, I mean, I agree. I thought the one was really interesting. I think the two makes sense. I think the favorite makes sense. I think a lot of horses make sense. And honestly, for the first time ever, I actually would not be playing me and Mr. C in the spot. I love the horse. He'll always have a special place in my heart. Realistically, yes. I'll probably end up putting a bet out of, just for the love of the game on the horse. But it's exactly because of what you said. I just don't like the spot for him here at all. I mean, the reality is he's 7. He's getting older. It's natural to start to see some regression. And I just don't think the setup is going to be there. I don't think there's quite enough pace. And I think for a race without a crazy pace, I think he would have needed more distance. I just don't think it's going to set up right for him. I mean, who knows? Maybe they do end up going crazy fast. And like I said, I'll never go against him. So of course I'll have something on him, but they're going to have to fly more than it looks like, at least to me on paper, than they actually would. I don't know if you could get the pace projector up or anything, but at least to me, that's how I kind of saw it. Like you said, it doesn't look like it's going to set up enough for him, but I'll be cheering him on.
Races, but either way, it's set. Timeform does denote a fast pace, but it has just the 4 and the 10 who are actually both cross-entered into other races that we'll talk about. I like Injunction actually a lot more in this race than I do the one that we're going to talk about on the turf. So if he does run in this spot, I think Injunction might end up being my top play in that race. You guys, if you guys don't know, I post all my opinions on Saturday at AP Roscoe K on X or Twitter. Follow me over there for everything final that I'm going to have coming out on Saturday. I'll post this full card as well as Belmont. But Money Supply, Mike Joyce, thanks so much, Mike, for joining the show, man. Greatly appreciate it. He said Money Supply had Joe Sharp with Jaime Torres aboard at 12-1. I thought this turf move was kind of weird for Joe Sharp. I mean, Money Supply, I don't think has ever run on the turf. Has a little bit of turf breeding. The Dams has 2 winners on turf. I think she's 2 for 8 on the turf and starts, or obviously her progeny, but they're 2 for 8 in turf and with an 83 top buyer. It just seems like a really weird move. It almost like the cross end. I would assume Money Supply goes later, and selfishly, I would love for Money Supply to go later in the card. Same thing with Capuna on the outside, the 10, Mitch Merle, Brett Calhoun at 10-1. I don't see why the turf move is needed here. I think he'll go later. He's 4-1 on the morning line in that race, so I assume he's going later as well. But will be interesting to see. That's gonna be a very common theme, guys, throughout this card, and I'll bring us full screen. There's a lot of cross entries. Prairie Meadows has a good card on Saturday as well. On Friday or Saturday, actually. I'm not sure. I don't remember exactly, but they have a really good card. Lots of horses cross-entered there and horses cross-entered in between races. So be sure to check the final scratches before making your plays on Saturday. But yeah, Injunction, if he goes here, probably be my top pick. But Gray's Fable, Runaway Storm. I'm not very interested in Masters of Foxhounds. If he won, would I be that surprised? No, but he would need to produce something to be able. I'm not playing him at 7-2. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. D'Amato's also 0 for 12 at Horseshoe Indianapolis in the last 5 years, so that's something to keep in mind as well. Last race outside of the late pick 5 that we're talking about is the Indiana Bred Stakes, the snack handicap. And guys, this race, my gosh, this race is it's really fun because there's so many horses that you can't really separate. But man, is it tough. I ended up landing on the second choice, the number 7, Indian Creed, Jaime Torres and Mike Maker at 7-2. I went 7, 8, 12 in this spot. Jailhouse Justice at 10-1. I threw in third. Like I said, I'll talk about it more because I'm gonna actually film all day on Saturday when I'm there, talking about the horses and what I see in the paddock. But man, this race is tough. 3-year-olds, Indiana breds on the turf. I don't need to say anything more than that. 7, 8, 12 for me in the snack handicap. Guys, let's move on and let's get into our handicapping. Race 8 starts the late pick 5, and that's where we'll start our deep dive. It is the Michael G. Schaefer Memorial Stakes, going 1 mile and 70 yards on the dirt for 3-year-olds and older. $100,000 on the line. 11 horses in this race, and that's actually a very, very good turnout for these types of races, as you'll see a very common theme throughout the entire late pick 5. The morning line favorite is a very lukewarm one. The number 5, Capuna, for Mitch Merle, Brett Calhoun at 4-1 is, again, we talked about earlier. Lots of horses are cross-entered. The number 8, Trademark, I believe won this race last year, so he's back in. Fernando de la Cruz rides again for Victoria Oliver at 9-2. And third choice, the number 10 to the outside, Mr. Wireless, Brian Hernandez rides for Brett Calhoun. And I'll bring up our picks right now as we'll start going here. You'll see I'm going with the number 7, Money Supply. Kind of, again, gave away my hand earlier. I like him a lot in this spot. Charlie's going with he's going with Injunction, the horse cross-entered before into this race. So Charlie and I are on opposite ends of the spectrum there. He obviously hopes he stays here. Noah's going with the number 10, Mr. Wireless. On guys, like I said, these are tough, and we're going with 3 separate horses on top as it shows. But Charlie, I'm gonna let you go first, man. Injunction is a horse I obviously talked about a little bit, but that last race on the dirt was certainly good enough here, and William Collins brings him all the way over here from Churchill. So this is a good price as well at 12-1.
Yeah, I don't really understand the 12-1, to be honest with you. I mean, I started to do a little handicapping yesterday. Obviously, to finish it up today, I would have guessed Injunction would have been somewhere around 6-1 in this spot, maybe 7-1 the highest. So I'd happily take that. I know you obviously preferred him on the turf, and I know he has some decent efforts on turf, but all of his career best efforts are on the dirt. So for me, bringing him to the dirt, honestly, is something I would like to see them do. I'd prefer to see him take a shot on this race. Admittedly, a little biased because I think Injunction super talented. So it'd be one less horse for me and Mr. C to have to take on. That's probably better than him at this stage of his career. Yeah, I thought that effort last time out was incredibly impressive. I think that was the race with Arthur's Ride, was it? That we were there for the Kentucky Derby weekend. I think that was the race that Arthur's Ride was the super heavy favorite and who came back to romp after that awful effort. But yeah, I mean, they were flying in this race. I remembered watching it, and Junction was one that I had thought about putting on one of my horizontals, but ended up getting bet all the way down to 3-1. So I tossed the horse and quickly realized how much of a mistake I made. But this horse went right to the lead in an extremely hot pace and was able to end up going away and be geared down despite that. I just think I think this is still a horse that has a lot of great efforts left in the tank. I know there was the dud at Oaklawn 3 back, but then ran against Running Bee in a very decent effort on the turf for a horse that, again, doesn't have a ton of turf experience. And you just look from a figures perspective, is pretty much consistently running, in the past in the high 80s, low 90s, and then just popped a 96 off that turf race, switching back to the dirt. And I don't know, I just thought that was a super impressive performance. I mean, this horse consistently runs his race. He doesn't usually run a bad effort. And I know there's going to be some decent pace in here, but again, he dealt with a crazy hot pace last time and one going away. So I think he's one of the speed horses I would trust the most. And at 12-1, I'll take that any day of the week.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, double digits are always top priority, and I'll never talk you off of that, is what I always say. Noah, you have Mr. Wireless on top. The only thing I don't like about him is I don't like the outside posts going a mile at Indiana. It's one of those weird ones where it's a very quick run up to that first turn. So having Mr. Wireless in the 10 post, and he's not necessarily a horse that wants to be way up front, but you can see the pace projector has him, pretty wide out there. Did you take that into consideration at all? Or he'll get a good trip no matter what. It's obviously just got to navigate from out there.
Yeah. With you being there, you would know a little bit better than I would. I know the mile and 70 is a little bit of a strange configuration that they run here at Horseshoe Indies. So that definitely could be a concern. Another concern could be that a lot of his races have been on Lasix, which is not normally something that I look into, but you're just kind of, splitting hairs in a field like this because it's such a tough race.
Yep.
I thought 2 back was a really nice effort. I actually had some interest in him in that Churchill Downs race. I think I had him in second because I actually had Gunpilot on top.
Yep.
But he's shown that type of talent going 2 turns before. He's been really good in the past. He was really good, spring of last year, in the Louisiana circuit. He's actually 2 for 2 here at Indiana. So I think if, BJ hops on and if he's able to tuck in, there does look to be quite a bit of pace in here. So I'm hoping that is to his benefit.
And I showed the Time Form US, of course, and it says it denotes fast pace. Mr. Wireless can definitely win this race, guys. And obviously, Mike Joyce is very high in him. Mark Bogas points out as well, Mr. Wireless is 2 for 2 at Horseshoe Indianapolis. And that's the one thing I was going to bring up. He actually won this race 2 years ago. You can see it right here. Deshaun Parker aboard, ran a 95 Beyer. The Beyer figures easily set up for this horse. Sitting a really nice stalking trip. The post is the only thing that scares me in this race. If he's going to be 3-4 wide, I mean, it's going to be hard to win from out there. But if he gets a good trip, he'll definitely be on my plays somewhere. But that was the only thing that I didn't like about Mr. Wireless. But with Money Supply, guys, which is who I have on top, I showed the pace scenario, right? It's just a matter of this horse runs so well into hot paces. We saw it in the mine shaft, Shutter. My God, it's still annoying.
Mine shafted.
I know, mine shafted. Yeah, that's honestly how I felt. That's for damn sure. I know people say Money Supply is more of a slop horse than he is a fast dirt runner. He's still, he's 8 for 9 in the money on fast dirt and 4 for 9 on the win end, guys. I mean, he's not a straight slop specialist, but if he gets pace to run into here, I think Money Supply makes a whole ton of sense in this race. Obviously, we'll see where he goes, either to the turf or the dirt, but 8-1 on Money Supply is one I'm definitely willing to take the risk on for Joe Sharp and Jaime Torres. Trademark is a horse I have that you guys don't have anywhere. I get it. He might just be past what he was good at. That Clark, though, last year was so good, beating First Mission, who obviously ran a clunk, not a clunker. He just didn't run that well this last week in the Stephen Foster to mine and Howard's dismay. But that Clark was really good. He won this race last year at Indy. Continued to run 99s. Hasn't been that good, but there's no Highland Falls. There's no First Mission. Cagliostro, National Treasure. There's none of those horses in this race. Should get another good setup. A little bit more to the inside of Mr. Wireless, who's going to run a very similar trip. And I think he can definitely at least finish in the money, if not vie for this win, as long as he goes back to those last year numbers. But again, I understand he might just not be where he used to be. But no, I'll go to you next, and then Charlie, I'll let you finish here. War Campaign is a horse we both have in third. I thought was interesting, maybe a little slow compared to like Mr. Wireless. Philip Sims is only one winner in 2024, but this race kind of sets up for a trip like War Campaign, that little bit of stalking trip, maybe get first run on horses like Money Supply. Yeah,
definitely could get first jump. You look at some of the races that he's run this year, look at the competition that he's faced. He was second best to First Mission when he ran really well in the Essex after he threw that clunker in at the Pegasus. And then in the Ben Ali, it seemed like everybody and their mother had that Kings Barnes War Campaign exacta. I think you and I included, Kyle.
Yes, that's correct.
And then in the Blame, he didn't really have much of an excuse, just didn't really run. I would have him higher, but if you look a little closer, the three best efforts that he's ever run are actually on the slop. So if you kind of take those away from his resume, his best race on a faster track's a 93, which is competitive, but I don't necessarily think that it's really a shoe-in a race like this. So that's kind of why I had him in third rather than higher.
I couldn't agree with you more on that regard. Last horse we'll talk about, Charlie, real quick, is Capuna. We have this horse in second. This was a horse that almost just seems to me like he always gets good runs, but never is able to really finish. Ran that Evangeline Downs Mile, came back to Churchill on Derby Day. I actually liked him a lot on Derby Day and ran second at 6-1, then came back at Churchill in an off-turf race and still, couldn't get the finish done to 5-star General, who's also in this race. So that was what I didn't like. But look, he makes a ton of sense and is your morning line favorite to boot.
Yeah, for me, this is a morning line favorite. As you could see me going with a 12-1 horse who I would clearly play against. However, here's what I will say. The reality is I watched that race on May 27th. I was actually at the OTB that day, and I didn't bet that race, but I happened to see it out in the background and watched it. And I also went back to watch the replay. 5-star General, who I know somebody talked about in the chat.
Yep.
I don't like the horse in this race. That's one I wouldn't play back to just because there's a lot of pace in here. And the
Right.
reality is, you can see the times. It honestly visually looked even slower than the time showed. 5-Star General just sort of walked the dog, even if it looks a little faster than that. And then there was just nothing really the 5 could do to sort of close into that pace. The horse had so much left off the turn. I just think Mitchell Merle can get this horse to sit a perfect trip again and run very solidly. This is just kind of a horse that, when I watch the replays, has kind of been the benefit of getting great trips over and over again.
Yep.
But I have no issue with that. I mean, we kind of talk about that with a horse that I love that Noah hates in First World War, where that horse kind of always runs a decent effort and, maybe overruns because of good trips. But sometimes you just got to respect it, because part of getting that good trip is just the jockey and the horse getting into that spot in the first place. And I mean, like you touched on, this horse in 19 starts has 7 seconds. So yeah, of course, I keyed in on that as well. A favorite I wouldn't play because this one doesn't get the job done. But if you're looking for a horse to play underneath or and just, to get in the money, I think the 5 makes more sense than anybody else in this race. The horse loves to run in the money. I mean, 13 out of 19 starts have been top 3. So I just thought this was a safe bet. And then for money supply, I agree with what you said completely, Kyle. I think the pace sets up completely. I think the question is just, will the horse get there in time? I was kind of debating about putting the 5 or 7 in second. And also, I will say about the allegations about that horse only benefiting from the slop. I wish that was the case, because I played a strong exacta of that horse underneath first mission, and the horse did not run that well in the slop at all. So clearly not every time does it work, but I like the spot here. Way more than the turf, by the way. I agree with you completely.
I do. Obviously, he'll be a better price in the turf. So you like him and think he can run on turf. Obviously, you want him to go there like Mike Joyce does. But I think he fits in for pace scenario in this race completely, and hopefully he goes here. Capuna also 5 for 5 at the mile 70, 5 for 5 top 2 in his career. So that's another thing to point out. I'm going 7-8-4. Charlie's going 2-5-7. Noah's going 10-7-4. Guys, let's continue to keep going here. Race number 9 is, this is definitely probably the toughest, if not one of the toughest races in this sequence. The Ellen's Lucky Star handicap. 1 mile on the turf for Indiana bred fillies on the turf. And man, you'll feel the 12 with 4 also eligibles as well. Morning line favorite is actually pretty heavy. The number 4, or heavy for this type of open field. The number 4 Under the Palms, Brian Hernandez, Kenny McPeak at 5-2. Little Gin in Class, Fernando De La Cruz, and Tim Eggleston at 3-1. Your second choice. Third choice being to the outside of the number 9 Best Cupcake for Gavin Ashton and Michael Lauer. And I'll bring up our picks right now, guys. And Charlie and I are both going with the morning line favorite. We're actually going with the same top 3 horses. So that's there. If you guys like Charlie and I's picks, maybe this is the race to play them. Noah, you're going Little Gin in Class, a horse that neither of us have anywhere. So I'm actually interested to hear what you like about this horse. And I'll kind of go into, I mean, obviously what I didn't like, but no turf, which is going to be a very common theme throughout a lot of these horses. A lot of them are trying either turf for the first time or haven't run on it in a while. But this 77 last time Noah on the lead definitely fits.
Yeah, this was just I think this is a scenario where, Kyle, when you're there at Horseshoe Indy, you need to mingle with some Indiana people, because their guess would be much better than mine in a spot like this. The way I saw it, Little Gin in Class was the speed of the speed. They're going a mile on the turf, which, could be a little bit of a short run. So the fact that she draws the inside post, I think De La Cruz is just going to kind of send from there and kind of dictate things up front. Like you said, that last race, I know she was, between 7 and 8-1, but she did it well. And even though the number the number 2 back didn't come back that well, she did that one really well as well. So just from a visual standpoint, if De La Cruz puts her on the lead, I think she's got a shot. Obviously, the turf is a question. But when we cover these smaller racetracks, I did the same thing at Canterbury. I'm just going to kind of put my trust in the trainers that do very well there.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair. The only thing I didn't like about Little Gin in Class, Charlie, this kind of leads into our discussion on the 4 as well, is this. They have another fast pace going. Although I do like that Little Gin in Class did draw the inside. I think that helps her a lot. But Charlie, you'll see our horse, the number 4, with the best late pace in the field, according to time form, going to set a really nice trip. And that's kind of what I saw as well. The number 4, Under the Palms. Another one that doesn't have a whole lot of turf. Actually, doesn't have any, they had 1 turf race at Saratoga first time out, actually losing to Hard to Justify, which obviously your future Breeders' Cup champion at 2. This horse has been much better at 3. Now going to try turf for the first time. but does have a little bit and is definitely working forwardly, Charlie.
Yeah, I just personally keyed in. I was like, obviously getting McPeak with, BJ again. And I just think the big thing that's going to kind of help this horse is just the class. I mean, I understand that it's not like, oh, you're looking at how we've talked about in the past where it's a horse running against these monsters like we were talking about with horses running against ones like First Mission and a horse that's been in stakes races. But the reality is we're talking about a lot of horses that have been, more on some of the local circuits and running at Horseshoe Indy primarily, which obviously I think we can all kind of agree isn't the same level as Churchill and Saratoga. And yeah, I mean, trying to make a debut at 25-1 against Hard to Justify is certainly a big ask. So for me, I was willing to draw a line through that race and not panic about this horse not fitting. I actually was pretty impressed with the replay when I watched the race last time out. I think 1 1/8 was just a little too long for her, and I think this slight cutback will be beneficial. And I also think she's pretty versatile. I mean, you look at when she broke her maiden and she sat a little bit off and then made the move. And I think she honestly could get a similar setup in this race. And then last time kind of decided to send in a decent, honest pace and then just couldn't hold them off. But I think the slight cutback and the, switch to the turf could be really beneficial. And I think, if she can just tuck in right behind and get the first jump, it could be a perfect trip.
I think above all else, Charlie, it's what you said the last there. I think she's gonna get a near perfect trip in this race. And Mark Bogas, obviously, we have very astute viewers in the chat. Also, I wanted to shout him out earlier, but he said, Oldie from Equine Edge. Hey, Kyle and Bettin N Boozin crew. Thought I would drop by and support the show. Oldie and I basically hung out the entire weekend as the guys were doing the Hawthorne Invitational. Oldie and I were just talking and going through some stuff. So, Oldie, thanks so much, man, for joining the show, as well as the rest of the Equine Edge guys in the chat. He said, good stuff coming soon with Equine Edge and HHH Racing Podcast. Again, on the works. Thank you guys. Thank you guys all for supporting the show tonight. I really, really appreciate it. I think she's going to get a perfect trip, Charlie, as I said. That race at Oaklawn Park fits perfectly. And Mark Bogas, like I said, forerunning versus open company, then now coming back to Indiana State Breds. I think that's a little bit of a drop in competition to what she's been facing. The turf is obviously the big question, but she makes all the sense in the world of this spot as long as she can take to the turf. The Dam doesn't really have any turf. The only turf race actually is that first race for Under the Palms. Enticed, breeding side, again, 7%, 11%, but very little sample size. The turf route does have 55 starts and about 40% in the money or so, but she just makes so much sense. Speed figure wise, pace projector wise, McPeak brings her here, brings Brian Hernandez along with, just should be for me the horse to beat in this race, and should get a still decent price with the turf in question at 5-2. No, I'll let you finish up your last two, and then Charlie, there are same last two as well. So anything you want to jump on, then we'll move on. A little more cracking for Ian Wilkes. Noah, you have this horse in second. Ran it at this is one of the only few that actually has a good result on the turf in this race. Last time out in an N2X allowance in State Bred company. Now comes to a State Bred stake. We'll need to improve a little bit based on buyer numbers, but again, one of the only ones with turf experience. Noah.
Yeah, the 2 and the 9 are both coming out of that N2X race, which we both have in second and third. I thought out of the turf efforts that I had seen from some of the competitors in this race that had run in those state bred turf races, I thought this was probably the best one. So I just went with those two that kind of, finished well and ended up running well in that race. I do like a little more Kraken a little bit more in this spot compared to Best Cupcake, just because I think the price is right. And like you said, you're going to get a little more speed on the front end. It looked like in that race, Best Cupcake kind of got the jump on the 2. So I'm kind of hoping that it goes the other way around. But definitely 2 to consider because, there's not a lot of turf form in a race like this, which makes it very tough.
I don't disagree with you. Charlie, we'll go to you, and then we'll move on here. Best Cupcake, Michael Lauer put her first-time turf last time out, and, man, did she take to the turf. Never really showed that type of rating ability on the dirt, then goes to the turf, granted, against State Bred company, but still took to the turf, and now if she continues to improve, I think she's definitely at least an underneath play in this race.
Oh, no, absolutely. I think this is the one to watch out for sure. I mean, I definitely take note with what Noah said. There's a reason I, still ended up having the two in my top three. But the thing I keyed in on, like you touched on, was this horse's first attempt on the turf. And clearly the public believed as well that she would be ready for that turf debut. She was bet all the way down to 2-1 after being 30-1, 52-1, and 47-1 in the three races prior. So it's not like this is one that's any sort of money burner by any means. But yeah, I liked that replay a lot. I thought it was impressive. Again, I agree with Noah that this one benefited from getting the jump, and the reality is in a pace like this could set up better for the two. But the other thing I kind of keyed in on was, again, that was just the first effort on the turf. So I just think not only was this one of the only horses with actual decent turf experience, but also, we kind of talk about a lot of times second time out, but I don't think just second time out, for a horse's whole career or off a layoff, but I think also on a surface is an angle to look at for sure. Is that was Best Cupcake's first real chance to get an opportunity to show if there was any ability on turf, and clearly they saw a lot. So I think she is honestly the real biggest threat to the favorite.
I don't disagree with you. I also thought that was interesting, Charlie. You brought up the odds: 30-1, 51-1, 46-1, 2-1 favorite on the turf first time out. So Oscar Performance has obviously been very, very good with turf runners, 17% in turf routes, wet turf, which I don't think it'll be too wet. Actually, might be a little wet. It's supposed to rain a little bit throughout the week, but Saturday is supposed to be perfectly nice. So obviously, Oscar Performance has done very well. Not too many turf routers for the dam, but 2 for 20, 10%, 9 for 20 in the money. So definitely turf breeding there. And if she continues to move forward off that last race, definitely one to keep in mind, at least underneath, if not vying for the win. Touchdown Pass is the last one I'll kind of touch on. It's the only other one that's done well on the turf. This horse was absolutely nowhere sprinting. Then Michelle Elliott put this horse longer at 1:70, won on the lead. Then the next time out, puts on the turf at a route, wins on the lead again. So maybe she's finally found something with this horse, but with the amount of speed it looks like on paper in this race, Touchdown Pass is definitely going to have her work cut out for her if she wants to make it all the way on the win end. And actually, I'll bring up one other horse because James just brought, I think, Primrose Girl is that, yeah, the number 6 in this race. I'll bring that horse up since we're talking about it. Primrose Girl, James says, is the number 6 in this race for Stephen Fostick, which is enough to make you giggle a little bit. This horse is the one that's gonna, if she takes the turf, that'll be the key difference. 1 for 6 in turf routes for the dam, albeit not with the best buyer speed figure. Although look at this though, turf routes 17 for 82 in turf routes on the sire side. So definitely one that could take to the turf more than the turf, although for an 0 for 25 trainer this meet. But 30-1 might be a nice price for a first-time turfer with a decent amount of turf breeding. So James, I don't, that could be one that you could be looking for at a price. I'm going 492. So is Charlie, also going 492. Noah's going 129. Guys, let's keep it moving here, and we'll go a little bit quicker through this one. Race 10 is the Indiana General Assembly Distaff Stakes, field of 11, and I'll bring up the Equibase right now. The morning line favorite is to the outside, the number 9, Misread, for Brian Hernandez and Tom Drury Jr. Second choice is the first-time Brad Cox runner, Alunda Queen, with Marcelino Pedroza aboard at 9-2. Third choice, the number 5, Regal Realm, off the layoff for Florent Giroux and Jonathan Thomas. And I'll bring up the picks right now. You'll see both you guys are going with the horse off the layoff, the number 5, Regal Realm. I have the horse in third. Definitely think she is live, but I ended up going with the morning line favorite in this race, the number 9, Miss Reed. Again, probably one of my, honestly, it's probably out of this entire sequence, it's probably my least strong pick. But definitely one that still makes a ton of sense. But I'll go to you guys first. Charlie, I'll let you talk. The number 5, Regal Realm. Again, off the layoff, but Jonathan Thomas is damn good usually off.
Yeah, and look, I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised you end up, I mean, I guess I know Miss Reed has had one other race since, but I was a little surprised because I know when we covered Olivia Moralda, we had kind of talked about how Miss Reed got a dream trip there. So I'm a little surprised to go with the horse whose big effort was there. But yeah, going into Regal Realm, I mean, look, this one obviously is coming off the layoff, but as you touched on the numbers, 22% off 180 plus days for Jonathan Thomas makes me excited. This horse has run against decent fields. I always like when this one's been at Woodbine, Gulfstream, Saratoga. Has been really decent everywhere she goes and has run against some very solid competition. Ran in that grade 3 at Kentucky Downs. And I mean, last time out was favored against one of the best horses in the world in Chili Flag. So obviously, this one's got to be a monster. If they had the audacity to bet this one over Chili Flag, who
we got two. We got Chili Flag and
yeah.
we're sorry, we had me and Mr. C earlier. Now we got Chili Flag to add to the Charlie Freeman.
Who, by the way, took
bingo card of horses.
Who, by the way, took out the world-renowned, according to Kyle and Noah, Coppice twice in a row. Put that rivalry to bed. But on a serious note, though, I think Regal Realm is super talented. I understand people might be concerned about some of, the cold paces that she's benefited from, but I love the consistency. I think her competition kind of stacks above the rest. And it was hard not to key in on those bullet works. I mean, you want to talk about a horse outside the, the trainer stats for having a horse ready off the lap. How about 47 flat twice in a row and then a minute flat almost and then 48 and 2? This is a horse that looks very, very serious. And I think if she runs back to some of that form, Kyle, I think you'd have to agree. She looks pretty tough to beat. And I don't think you're getting 5-1.
No, and I mean, I'll go to Noah real quick. I mean, I like her a lot. It's just a matter of Jonathan Thomas is very good off layoffs. If I can show those stats, Noah, I'll let you talk about what you liked about her. But while I bring up these stats, but greater than 180 days here, 17 for 85. Actually, it's funny enough, it's under his win percentage in the last 5 years, but he still wins at 20%. No, I thought the interesting thing was a lot of people don't bring back, to these types of stakes races. Maybe it's a prep for something else, which is what I was kind of a little bit dubious about. You see Jonathan Thomas, small sample size, but 1 for 8 in the money, bringing back horses in these stakes, in any stakes race for that matter, off of a 180-day layoff. Small sample size, but still something to note. But if she gets her trip, she looks pretty good in this spot. You're good, Noah. Go for it. I know you're lagging up a storm over there.
Yeah, I'm really glad that Charlie picked her because I think Charlie's finally coming to his senses. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, you're good. You're good. Go for it.
It's a little tough in this hotel, but there's not much else to say other than what Charlie pointed to with Regal Realm. I think she sits a really reasonable trip. I'm just going to kind of trust that Jonathan Thomas has her ready off this layoff. And like Charlie said, if those 2 bullet works are any indication of, what she's on the verge of doing, I think she's a very logical. It's a tough race, but I'm going to take a shot with her. As you'll see later, I'm going to, make a couple bets circled around her.
Yeah, and this might be one I come back to either change or regret because with the workout, I'm going to take a look at the workout report at Keeneland and maybe I'll see how she's working. Maybe I'll use Equine Edge to see how her workouts are going. But yeah, I mean, she makes a whole ton of sense if she's ready. Miss Reed, guys, is one. It was the softest pick I had in the sequence. I kind of touched on it already. Charlie pointed out Olivia Meralda was a horse that I absolutely loved in the Gamely at she was like 12-1 morning line, got bet down to like 5.8 to 1, ended up missing to Anna Set by half a length. Oh man,
she was so good.
Talk about PTSD. We're just so bringing up add that to the Kyle Roscoe PTSD bingo card because I've already brought up 2 horses that have made me sad. She has to improve a little bit, but off that last race at Churchill in the Mint Julep against Delahaye, who came back, the Chad horse that came back to run really well. Obviously, Olivia Meraldo came back to run really well. So I'm kind of playing the company line game here, but also she looks to sit a really nice trip in this race. And I'll bring up the time, form, pace scenario here, and you'll see she's actually 3 wide here with Regal Realm and Join the Dance. I mean, I didn't see her getting the lead in this race, but I guess there is not a whole lot of speed. So maybe Regal Realm and the 9 will sit right 1-2 right off each other. And if she does that, kind of sitting right off, that's where she does her best running. So I thought Miss Reed was definitely one to at least keep a look, keep an eye on at 7-2 morning line. Alonda Queen is a horse that I have in there. Newly is transferred to the Brad Cox barn, which is obviously an eye opener to a lot of people. This was a very, very well-meant horse. Ran in the QE2, granted, and ran in the Matriarch, didn't run very well in any of her grade 1 efforts, but of course, then goes to the Miss Liberty. First time off the layoff for Rudy Brissett. Runs decent, but never really got the pace to close into. Now comes over to the Brad Cox barn. Maybe not the best based on pace scenario, but looks to at least, again, to be good enough to run in the money. So she makes a ton of sense underneath. Last horse we'll touch on real quick, Fuente Ovejuna, or Ovejuna. Well, I actually don't exactly know how
I'm
to pronounce
happy you
that
had
name.
to say it.
I know. I was going to transfer it to one of you guys, and I felt bad. So either way.
Not me, please.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
you're good. You
no
stay
way.
down there for a second.
Give me a break. I'm already struggling.
Bro's waiting 10 seconds to respond to comments, and I'm going to give him to say that word. I don't think so. Either way, tons of tough races on the sheet. That last race in the Mint Julep and that same Delahaye race that I mentioned for Miss Reed. She makes a ton of sense. She does do a little bit better running with a little bit of pace in front of her. Not sure if she'll get it, but definitely one to at least keep in mind underneath. Charlie has this horse. Charlie and Noah both have this horse in third, so definitely one to keep in mind. Corey Lannery, also another jockey shipping over to Horseshoe Indianapolis. I'm going 9-10-5. Charlie's going 5-9-6, and Noah's going 5-10-6. Guys, let's keep it moving here. This is where we get into the really good stuff. The penultimate race is the Indiana Oaks, and that's a grade 3 going a mile and 16th on the dirt, a field of 8, and there's one very, very talented filly in this race. The number 7, Impel, your pretty heavy morning line favorite at 7-5. Second choice, the number 6, Band of Gold for Brian Hernandez and Kenny McPeak. Third choice, the number 4, Neon Icon for Edgar Morales and Rusty Arnold at 7-2. Guys, bringing up our picks right now, and I'll give you, it's nothing creative, guys. We're all going with Impel. She makes a whole ton of sense in this race. Noah, as long as you're good, I'll let you talk first on her. Again, don't need to spend too much time, but bringing up the pace scenario for this race, it only helps Impel in this race. I'll just say that.
Yeah, Impel, I believe, was my play of the day on the power picks on Oaks Day. I really thought it was either between her or Denim and Pearls, and Denim and Pearls really did not run well. And my main squeeze just, ran a race that she had never run before. So it was a little unfortunate that Impel had run so well, but just got kind of beat on the square. Brad Cox brings her back in this spot. This is, most likely probably something to get her ready for some bigger races down the line. But there's just really not a whole lot in here. So I think if Impel, runs her B+ race, I think she probably wins this race pretty easily.
Yeah, and Charlie, I'll let you add anything, but again, there's not too much more to add about her, as long as, especially if she gets that type of scenario with the pace that Timeform envisions. This is a very tough race to beat her in.
No, I completely agree. I mean, it's something we've kind of talked about all night. It's just, you look at the strength of schedule, who the horse has been running against, and she just looks awfully tough. I know, obviously, she took some decent money, obviously not nearly as much as Denim and Pearls, who got hammered down in that race, but still ran a decent second. It wasn't an awful effort by any means. It just wasn't quite good enough, but she's been ultra consistent. I just think, we'll get to our best bets later. I think she towers over this field, and I will definitely be, playing some bets around that.
I mean, you'll see my bets later. Absolutely. We'll go on. Neon Icon's a horse we all have in there. Charlie, real quick again, anything you want to touch on that last race? Again, in and off the turf race, but still 81, sitting a really nice trip, which is what I envision. She'll be a little bit, I think, more behind Impel, but I think that type of trip still warrants Neon Icon a look in this race.
Oh, yeah, and she's another one that I think is super interesting in Townsend. I mean, I get the debut only shows a 66, but visually it was so much more impressive than that. When I watched the replay at first, I was like, all right, well, this is one of the horses I can knock off my list, because it looked like she just didn't have anything. They were getting off the turn, and she didn't really have much interest or horse, and the jockey was asking, and she wasn't responding. And then all of a sudden, Luis got something in her to re-wake up, because then she just rolled right through a gap. He didn't really have to work that hard to get her to split through it, but once she did, she just rolled on by. And then obviously, going all the way to a mile and a fourth and getting bet down to 56 cents on the dollar is a bit interesting and certainly an interesting approach to go there. But, she ended up proving why she got hammered down and romped on that day as well. So I think she's definitely the biggest threat. I don't think anybody's as good as Impel, clearly, and obviously she's going to need to take a big step forward. But the one thing she has going for her, in my opinion, aside from obviously, the good works and 2 solid races, is just the lack of experience, I think, helps her because I think she has, the most to gain, the most potential to step forward. But, ultimately, I don't think she necessarily will win, but certainly a great one to look at underneath. And to me, at least, is the one that if you do really want to beat the 7, this is the one I'd go with.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. Bandit Gold's the other morning line choice in this race. She was very, very good at the beginning of the year, winning the Martha Washington, then going to the Honeybee, and just really hasn't done any running since. I mean, even ran in the listed Monomoy Girl. Granted, Our Pretty Woman's a very nice horse, but 25 and sitting close to the pace, just never really being able to get going. If she returns to form, she definitely could have a say in this race, at least underneath, and she's definitely working like it. McPeak doesn't usually work. His horse is too fast, and man, is Bandit Gold working really well. But she's always kind of been a good worker in the morning from what I see on the. I mean, she's worked a 1 minute, at least close to a minute flat in all these workouts, and this has been since the Bourbonette Oaks and the Edgewood. So her three of her worst buyers have come when she's working well. So I think even though she's working well, that's still something to note. She might just be a very, very good one in the mornings. But I'll tell you what, guys, I don't think we're getting 7-5 on Impel. I don't think we're getting anywhere close. I would absolutely love 4-5, but I think 3-5 and maybe, 2-5. I mean, that might be a little steep with some of the horses in here. I think a lot of people are going to gravitate to Neon Icon, but still, I think she's definitely not going to be that high. Noah, I'll give you one last time. I think it was Chitalis, I believe, is how you pronounce it.
I think that's what we settled on, yeah.
Yeah, but either way, you feel very good, very strongly about this horse, so I want to throw it to you and have you have the last say on this race.
Yeah, I do. This is a California horse, a horse that I'm very familiar with. On debut last summer at Del Mar, she beat a horse by the name of Barbara T, who actually was off for a while and only ran her second start at Keeneland and was very impressive. So she's a promising filly. I know Mark Glatt always thought highly of her. Took a shot with her in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies. She had no chance with that start, and then even going to the Starlet at Los Al, she took the second place horse, got TQ'd, and she took the brunt of that altercation. Tried her on the turf. She ran well. It was actually her career best buyer. I do like the fact that Glatt, because Glatt transferred over to Grant Forster, but this is Mark Glatt's horse. So he got her over here early. She's had 2 really good works at that local training track. And Freysu rides, who's into ride Stronghold in the Derby. Yeah. So I think one that's going to sit, right off the pace, and I think is a filly that some are going to overlook and just kind of, go think the race is kind of, 2-4 and move on. Or 7-4 and move on is what I meant to say. But I do think Chitalis is very interesting in this spot.
And Charlie, you have number 8 real quick, like 30 seconds. But what you have the horse at 12-1 in third. Again, maybe another little price play underneath.
Yeah, I just thought her effort last time out was really solid. I know she hasn't been running in stakes races, but has been running in nonetheless 100,000 optional claimers. And I think that 4 horse that we liked in the card earlier in the card was in that same race that she ran out on June 1st. And I just think, again, you're seeing consistent figures in those high 70s, low 80s. And I think an effort like that is certainly good enough in this field to at least contest for second and third. And if you're looking for a way to make some money, with the 7 and you're trying to take a shot like you were saying, and I know we both really like the 4, but I have a feeling that one will take a lot of money too. This could be a decent one to try to mix in somewhere underneath to at least turn some value from a favorite that'll probably be like 3-5.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that, again, adding those double-digit horses is definitely where you'll get your value with a horse who's going to be even money or most likely lower. I'm going 7-4-6. Charlie's going 7-4-8. Noah's going 7-2-4. Guys, before we get to the last race, which is the Indiana Derby, thank you guys all so much for joining. We have 2 things I want to mention real quick. Howard is putting polls in the chat, so please answer those. You'll see them on the bottom side of the chat box on the right side of the screen if you're here on YouTube. Last one put up is who's going to be the winning winning trainer for the Saratoga meet of 2024. So if you guys see them, please feel free to answer those in the chat. And also, we're going to have Jim Miller on again after we finish talking about the Indiana Derby to talk about Hawthorne on Saturday. So don't go anywhere, as we're going to have a really good discussion about those races. But guys, let's move on to the feature on the card. It is the grade 3 Indiana Derby for $300,000 going a mile and a 16th, of course, for 3-year-olds, another field of 8. And we'll go through this one quick, guys. You'll see another pretty good favorite, the number 2 Stronghold, as Noah touched on. Fresu into ride. D'Amato trains. EJ Won the Cup is your second choice. Number 7, Mike Smith and Doug O'Neill at 5-2. And the Cox runner, the untested stakes Cox runner, Dragoon Guard, Florent Giroux picks up the ride at 7-2. Guys, let's bring up the picks right now, and we're all going with Stronghold, guys. I actually didn't think we'd all be going with Stronghold in this race. He's coming off obviously a little bit of a layoff from the Kentucky Derby. He didn't necessarily run too bad, got involved in the hot pace early and kind of just faded back to 7th, but still not a horrible effort. His earlier efforts, though, Noah, make a ton of sense. And against other kind of non-tested horses in this race that haven't been tested nearly on the level that Stronghold does, I think the class will end up showing in this race.
Yeah, Stronghold's always been a horse where it's kind of taken him a while to kind of figure things out. He had a little bit of a layoff going into that Sunland Derby, and that's kind of where he showed what he was really capable of. Came back and won that San Diego Derby, which, got him enough points to get him in the Kentucky Derby. The Derby's the Derby. A lot of shit can happen. And when you're in tight spots with so many horses like that, there's so many excuses with a 20-horse field. I think you can kind of excuse that effort a little bit. Just kind of going off of those races 2 and 3 back, he's, shown the improvement that I've liked. He's working well. D'Amato's obviously got him pointed to this spot, and Fresu, I mentioned earlier, is into ride. I am interested to see what you guys think, because I thought at least one of you would go with Dragoon Guard, just kind of the up-and-comer. And I think Dragoon Guard's going to take a little money, so I thought Stronghold was kind of a sneaky pick, but apparently not.
Well, I don't disagree with you on that, right? I think Dragoon Guard's definitely going to take some money in this race. Charlie, I'll go to you. You can obviously add anything on Stronghold that you want. I think what we've said is kind of all we really need to say on him, but this is one horse, is that untested horse in this field, right? This is going to be his first stake. Brad Cox ships him here instead of shipping him to, like Churchill or Saratoga for something like that. Florent Giroux picks up the ride here. Obviously, super improving 3-year-old, makes a ton of sense, but it's going to have to show that he can run with the big boys.
Yeah, it feels like him and Sir Greyland are kind of the 2 horses, the 6, obviously, that have, put up some decent numbers, but haven't really had the chance to beat anyone yet. Obviously, the 8's going to be the one who's going to be the more high-profile horse that's going to take the money with Giroux and Cox. The main thing I sort of keyed in on, to be honest, is, don't get me wrong, the efforts were solid. This horse is able to get loose. But the one concern I sort of have is I feel like he hasn't really been challenged. He hasn't really faced a whole ton of adversity. He's gotten to kind of deal with some nice cold paces, which works really nicely for his style, where he's not a full-on presser, but he also is too forward to say he's a stalker. So I kind of just feel like the paces he's gotten are exactly perfect. So now he's going to be taking on better competition, and I just don't think he'll be able to get away with that ideal of a pace again. And as people in the chat have been saying, and you were saying, Kyle, I just think this horse is going to end up being bet down to second choice. For me, I think Stronghold's the pick. I'm a little surprised that Noah thought that it was a little sneaky to go with the 2-1 Derby horse favorite, but here we are. I still think, Stronghold, clearly the horse. I'm just taking the piss. I know he's the horse to beat, and people in the chat are talking about how well he's been working. I'm hoping that honestly he somehow is every bit of 2-1. Maybe is. I think obviously the outside horse is going to be the one dictating that. And I'm curious what you guys kind of think about the 7, because I saw in the chat that Howard was saying he thinks the 7's kind of interesting, and especially because of how much Noah likes Mike Smith. But I think EJ Won the Cup is very interesting underneath, and I would love to get the value of that one under the 2 if people bet the 8.
I think people are mistaking you for me, Noah. That's what I think people are doing. But I thought it was really interesting that Mike Smith comes in to ride EJ Won the Cup, and The one thing I do like, and Howard pointed out, is that I think they're teaching him to rate and finish, and he'll sit a good trip. That's the one thing I actually like a lot about EJ Won the Cup in this race, is that type of stalking trip to get behind horses like I'd probably Stronghold, who will go out for the lead. But I mean, you know, he makes sense from that regard. And Doug O'Neill both trains and actually owns this horse, which I actually didn't know.
Sorry, say that again, Kyle. Yeah, I was cutting in and out.
No, it's fine. Just what'd you like about EJ Won the Cup? That's all I was blabbing on.
For me, he was kind of the horse that I was a little bit against in this spot. I actually don't. I've got the 5 and 3rd, who I think is a little interesting. But, you know, EJ Won the Cup for most of his career. He was a little bit one pace. I guess you could say he is learning to rate a little bit. I know he's a favorite in that Texas Derby, which I don't think we can watch.
No, we can.
Oh, we can?
You want to watch it?
No, I just, it was weird to me just because that was a style that I had never seen from him. And with that number coming back so well, it was a little hard for me.
Right in here.
Okay, I wasn't able to watch this race.
So this is Dymatic, a horse for Asmussen on the takes the front here. You'll see EJ Won the Cup actually finishes really well and ends up running him down, which what I said, Noah, was that I actually really like the new style that he has, both in the Santa Anita Derby. They took him off the pace, and then winning the Texas Derby actually very easily in that race. So I just think if they're turning a corner and rating with him now, I think he's got a very good chance to at least run a very good race in this one.
Yeah, and maybe that's just what he's become. You know, but what I've seen from him, I'm not going to kind of bank on the fact that he's really the horse that he showed in that Texas Derby. I don't really know how good that field was. You know, it could be telling that Mike Smith does come into ride. In my, so-called experience with betting the horses, I don't know if I've ever seen Mike Smith come to Horseshoe Indianapolis, which that could definitely be a tell. But yeah. You've got horses at 2-1, 5-2, and 7-2. So, it doesn't make a lot of sense if you're playing horizontally to include those three. So if I were to kind of throw one out, EJ Won the Cup would probably be it.
And that's completely fair. And that's coming from West Coast bias himself. Guys, we want to move on. I don't want to keep Jim waiting too long in the background, but David Barista says the 5 as a bomb is interesting. No, obviously thinks so. Has the horse in 3rd. I think the last race can be excused. I don't think that's really what he wants to do. I don't think he wants to sit that far back. Also kind of didn't break the best. So when he's 4 wide and trailing in a race where he doesn't really want to do that, if he's up a little bit closer to the pace stalking, I definitely think it can be excused. And 15-1 for Ricardo Santana also coming in for this race, I think makes a ton of sense. Just going to have to get the right trip. So, and Jim does bring up a good point as well. He says all of EJ's wins have come with him as a heavy favorite over weak fields. So again, another great thing to look at when you're going over the Indiana Derby. I'm going 2-8-7. Charlie's going 2-7-8. Noah's going 2-8-5. Guys, move on to best bets real quick. We'll bring Jim on and we'll let you guys go. Charlie, you first. Talk about your best bets real quick. Race 10, double 5-7. I know how much you guys love Regal Realm, and hopefully you guys should get a price there on that one. Regal Realm into Impel, and race 12 and Exacta Stronghold over both EJ Won the Cup and Dragoon Guard.
Yeah, I just quite honestly didn't want to do Impel into Stronghold and get no value when I believe that I could get more value playing it the race before into Impel, who I think a lot of people would agree is arguably the most likely winner. But I did see someone earlier in the chat even say that Regal Rum is a single in that race. I know Noah loves the 5. I love the 5. I think, the track record speaks for itself with this horse, and the way the 5 Regal Rum has been working lately seems like the layoff shouldn't be a problem at all. We talked about the trainer numbers as well. So if I can turn that into a way to bring a lot more value into Impel while using a horse I have a strong opinion on, I might as well with that double. And then obviously I think Stronghold's the horse to beat in the last race. And, we've talked about, some bombs in that race just now that, could theoretically come in. But for me, I think Stronghold's the horse to beat. And I think it's either going to be the 7 coming off the pace, or if the 8 proves, that he has the goods to at least be right in it the whole time, I think one of them finishes underneath. And I think, you're obviously not going to get a ton of value, but, still I think you can get at least 5-6-1 maybe on each of those exactas. And that's enough for me where I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you. Time form, I actually forgot to show the time form, but time form actually has Stronghold stalking in the 4, 7, and 8. That's a horse we can talk about, Kitty Hawk, along with EJ Won the Cup and Dragoon Guard out in front of Stronghold. So I think I actually like Stronghold a little bit better if he has a target in front of him.
Agreed.
Like that. So it makes a whole ton of sense. Charlie, good luck with your best bets. Noah, kind of same vein. win Regal Realm, and a dead straight exact to 7/2. Talk about your best bets.
Yeah, very similar to the kid up in the top right. I'm just going to go with a win bet on Regal Realm. I think that's a pretty difficult race, but I've kind of got her a little bit above the rest. I think it's hard enough to try and pick some horses underneath, or like Charlie said, that 5-7 double might be smart. And I'm just going to go with a straight win bet. And then race 11, if I were doing that NHC contest with you, Kyle, I think this would probably be the play that I would make, just because I think Impel's not going to be the price that she is on the morning line. 2 to 5, 3 to 5, probably somewhere along there. So if you can get value with an exacta, and I like Chatalis a little bit underneath, so I'm going to go straight 7-2.
I love it, man. Like I said, getting a little bit of value there with the third or the fourth or fifth choice in that race. Good luck with your best bets. I actually went with a win bet and a double as well. With double should be no surprise to anyone out there. Impel with Stronghold and Dragoon Guard. EJ won the cup. Like with Jim Pillar's, like so many people talked about, he can beat me, but I'm going to have to gain a little bit of value somewhere else. Maybe it'll end up just being a 7-2 and maybe a backup on Dragoon Guard based on what the price is. But Under the Palms, I talked about, guys, was going to set a really nice trip. Going to have to take to the turf, but hopefully that'll increase a little bit of value with Under the Palms. Brian Hernandez, Kenny McPeak at 5-2 morning line. So that'll be my best bets. But guys, thank you guys all so much for joining in for Indiana Derby Preview Day. Going to be an absolute ton of fun. Again, if you're going out there, please DM me on Twitter at AP Roscoe K. Would love to meet up with you guys, have a drink, have a beverage, hopefully smoke some victory cigars if we can get some good ones home. But everyone out there, yeah, please DM me on Twitter, as I will be there with my dad on Saturday. But without further ado, guys, don't go anywhere, because we're going to have Jim Miller on of Hawthorne Racecourse to talk about the late pick 4, on Saturday. That actually just came out, and I'll bring him on first before I let you two go. But from, of course, the man of all trades at Hawthorne Racecourse, Jim Miller. Jim, what's going on, my friend?
Hey, Bettin N Boozin, so I'm happy. I got my drink in hand, too.
Yes.
I saw Kyle had his, so that was
Absolutely.
good. Good card at Horseshoe Indianapolis, like you mentioned, Kyle. I've been out there numerous times. They have a great bar set up, basically right at the finish line, right under the tent. Great place to watch the races from there.
I know where Kyle will be.
Yeah,
I was going to say.
You'll enjoy that for sure. I like Dragoon Guard quite a bit, actually, in the Indiana Derby. That's the horse that's on the rise. I didn't think the Santa Anita Derby was a great race this year. Stronghold, yes, it's a grade 1 winner, but again, thought the West Coast was a little bit softer this year when you got by those two horses at Baffert that kind of fell off by the wayside. Maybe that horse is the one to beat, but I think Dragoon Guard, if you can get somewhere close to that 7-2, definitely worth looking to in the Indiana Derby.
No, absolutely, Jim. Love it so much. And Chris Walsh, like, subscribe, and hit the bell button. Chris, thank you so much for that. Absolutely. Please hit that like and subscribe button. It helps us out a lot. Charlie and Noah, I'll let you guys go, and Jim and I will go over the late pick 4 at Hawthorne on Saturday, which was just drawn, by the way. So we'll go over it firsthand for you guys here on the podcast. But Charlie and Noah, thanks, guys, so much for joining the show. Really appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys later. All right, Jim. So, my friend, how are you doing, first of all? You doing
good, man. Yeah, busy day. Like you said, it's a little bit of a change in schedule this week. We just drew the Saturday card about 4.5 hours ago. So we get to do some first impression handicapping of the card. And sometimes that's the best way to do it. Just look through the races and see how things unfold, see what you like, and see how it plays going from there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and we had a bunch of viewers. We do this a lot of the time for like Belmont, because Belmont, doesn't, or actually all the New York tracks for that matter, they don't draw their Saturday cards until Wednesday, which is obviously when we have our normal show. So people love to see, when we go through each type of horse, when we go through the scenario, how we see it. It's a ton of fun. So Jim, without further ado, let's get into it. I mean, the late pick 4 at Hawthorne starts in race 6 on Saturday, and it's actually starting off with a turf race going a mile on the Hawthorne turf course. It's a claiming 17,500 beaten claimer, and it draws a field of, I'm trying to get time form to work. Time form's being a little bit annoying with me. It draws a field of 8, and of course we don't have morning lines yet, Jim. But
I got him. I did the morning line, so I got him for you.
Of course, we got the man. I told you got the man who does it all here. So
yeah, morning line favorite, and there's going to be the 4 Miss River Red at 9-5. Second choice is the 6 All About Me at 2-1. Third choice, the 5 Dessert First at 9-2. But the 4 Miss River Rat, your 9-5 morning line favorite.
And we'll take a look at her first. I mean, you can see it has the 6. Actually, Timeform has favoring front runners here. It has the number 6 on the lead. All About Me, who you touched on the one of the top morning line choices. But we'll talk about the number 4 Miss River at first. And apologies to everyone out there. We don't since DRF doesn't technically finish their PPs until about 2 to 3 days before the card comes before the card goes out. We won't have numbers on the left hand side of the screen, but this is the number 4 Miss River at Chris Block. Man, talk about a great meet he's having, as he usually does in the Midwest. But this horse makes a ton of sense. Just going to have to take to the turf, as we haven't seen for the 2 races.
Yeah, and that's the thing about it. And the time for him is really very important, too, because the way the turf course is playing, especially when it's on the firmer end, it is much more of a front course. So you have to be on or near the lead. Horse like Miss River Rat's a horse that I'll be curious to see what happens, because you see that mile turf race back at the fairgrounds on February the 15th. The horse never really got into the race at any point, but that was much tougher. That was open company, open allowance. You're facing condition 17.5 claimers, going from a sprint back out to 2 turns. I do expect they're going to show some speed in here, but for me, I do actually think that you could possibly defeat this horse. Maybe the 6 All About Me is the one that is going to beat the horse, but last 3 starts, all good, all on the turf, all on the front end too. I think this is a horse that has every chance to wire the field, and you get a bug rider that's in the saddle that should benefit also.
Yeah, and I think the most interesting thing, for me at least, is this was a Stidham trained horse now coming over to be completely honest, even being a Midwest guy, I've never seen Rosas before, the name. So obviously 1 for 21 this meet at Hawthorne. All races in 2024 have come at Hawthorne. You mentioned the bug rider, but for me, if this horse gets out to the front, has no pace pressure at all, which by Timeform standards looks like it might be the case. I mean, that's the key, no matter who's training, who's riding. And
the thing about it, Rigo Rosas was the longtime assistant to trainer Doug Matthews, who we knew on the Chicago circuit, but also down in Louisiana too. So he definitely knows what he's doing, but he's kind of trying to get things going for his own stable. And as you see here, this is a horse that comes over from Stidham, fits so nicely in this spot. I thought ran a pretty nice race in that last out too. You're right, Kyle. Should just be able to cruise along on the front end here, back things down a little bit. I think he'll have more than enough left in the tank late in the lane. I thought this was a horse that was actually even a potential single to kick off the sequence.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it makes a whole ton of sense just from a straight pace scenario. Going through the rest of the field, Jim, I mean, Bali Baby for Joel Zawitz, another guy who we got very familiar with in the Midwest. This is a horse that almost seems like a little bit, hasn't shown the type of run that he had last year at Hawthorne. Not to mention that was sprinting, now stretching back out to the mile for the first time since an off the turf race where he did absolutely no running. You can obviously denote that maybe to the turf running, but makes sense, but is going to have pace scenario to run into. Same thing, kind of a lot of roses, has really good numbers and has back numbers to fit on the Hawthorne turf course, especially. But where'd you kind of land third choice when you were going through here in this race?
You know what? For me, third choice actually is the 5 Dessert First. And Dessert First is a horse that was kind of intriguing to me off that last out, because I thought that was a pretty solid effort from rating in that second flight early on, and then just kind of running on a little bit late. But Julio Felix has ridden this Hawthorne turf extremely well. He won 3 of the 4 turf races last weekend on the Hawthorne turf. He's aboard this horse today. Alexis Centeno's had a good meet too. But if you like All About Me, I think you have to like Dessert First too, because that was the one that was chasing in that spot. I thought that was a horse that could get into the mix.
No, absolutely. And not finishing that far behind. Granted, you see 3 3/4, first 2 right here were finished neck apart. So it was a little bit farther back from that top flight, but still one, at least if you're looking underneath, like you said, third choice, I think Dessert First definitely makes a whole ton of sense.
Yeah, and it's the 3 horses that I laid as the lower choices in the morning line that really make all the sense, because there's some other horses that I think are more or less just kind of trying the turf, get a chance to get that opportunity here because it's a lower level conditioned race. But a lot of horses that just, I don't know, they're going to have to run really big races to get into the mix in here.
No, absolutely. And as you touched on before with your morning line favorite, who was
the 4 Miss River
Rat, is the one dropping down in class, ran it, and actually an Illinois bred, which sadly we don't see much nowadays. Love when an Illinois bred runs well, and going to be dropping to that condition of 17.5. So makes a ton of sense, but it's definitely going to have a little bit of pace, or hopefully going to need a little bit of pace to run into, and that's why you can kind of run with All About Me, as Jim touched on. But we can move on to race number 7, Jim, as we keep moving on here. Actually, and this is actually a really nice race.
Good race, yeah.
Allowance optional 50K for a mile to 16th on the dirt, field of 8. And it's I joke about this all the time, Jim. It's so funny how many you can just like show a horse in front of me, like read the cliff notes. I'm like, you could just rattle off all the races that horse has been in. Illinois bred, Jeff the Lion the same way.
Yep.
How'd your morning line shape out here?
Well, and looking at this race, I mean, Read the Cliff Notes is such a cool horse too. I laid Pat's Property, the 1, as the 5-2 morning line favorite. The 7, Read the Cliff Notes at 3-1, followed by the 3, Ardenwood at 4-1. It's such an evenly matched race here. The one thing about it, the Illinois bred horses, and because they're so valuable in the state, they get the chance to run for a 50% higher claiming price, which is why you see $75,000 next to those Illinois breds in here. So you can protect those horses. And this is a race where, because they could still run in the Illinois bred stake races, they may not run for 50 because they don't want to get claimed. At 75,000, they'll take that opportunity to go in there. But Read the Cliff Notes, so cool. He loves this Hawthorne track. And it doesn't really matter for Read the Cliff Notes. Turf, dirt, just whatever. He just tries hard every time. He's got 10 victories over this Hawthorne track. He's one of my favorite horses, too. So he can run on the lead. He can come from off the pace. But you see, look up and down his races, just so consistent. He's the horse that I actually look to on top in this spot.
Yeah, and you couldn't have said it any better. You know, dirt, turf, even synthetic back in the day, it did not matter at all. And you know, it's always one of those horses you see running in the what I used to call the Bumblebee Silks, the Michelle Boyce Silks that she ran in. You can see Pace Projector here actually has the Pat's Property out there pretty far by himself, which makes obviously a lot of sense. You laid it as the 5-2 favorite. This is a horse I actually liked a lot in one of these races at Oaklawn. We covered one day on this show. Just from if he gets the lead on the front end, and even at Oaklawn, I mean, ran at Hawthorne last year, won on the front end, makes a ton of sense. I think Pat's Property actually was he in like Illinois Derby weekend or something like that? And he scratched out. I feel like if I remember correctly, I was correct.
Yeah, that's right. And John Herron's had himself such a good year. I mean, it doesn't matter. This is a guy that was kind of known in Illinois for some time. Then all of a sudden he's winning races at Oaklawn, had a tremendous meet. Winning races at Churchill Downs, had a very good meet. He's back here at Hawthorne. I found it interesting to see that Pace Projector there a little bit, to have him out that far in front, because I thought the 3 Ardenwood would actually be keeping him honest in this spot, as this is a horse that has a style that really kind of wants to put him into the race as well, too. You saw he kind of stalked the pace in that last out. The start 3 back, he was actually the horse on the lead, and they were going relatively fast up front there. But he's a horse that's a legitimate racehorse. I think he at least keeps things honest in here. And coming off that victory in that last start, I thought he was worth a little bit of a look as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, makes a ton of sense. You can see, even though, you know, he's rating that last race, still a length back and headed by, you know, the 3/4 pole. So it makes a whole ton of sense that he would be on the lead. I think they think just Pat's Property might be naturally faster out of the gate, but to have Pat's Property be alone that by himself by that far, I mean, you can see by time form has him by almost 18 points. So they think he's a lot faster, but I would, just from a tactics perspective, like you touched on, Jim, I think if Ardenwood's not towards the lead, I would feel like that's not where he wants to be and does his best running.
Yeah, and the thing that's interesting, if you look at the Pat's Property races at Oaklawn Park, you also have to take into regard that those mile races are all those short stretch races too, where it's very hard to make up ground because you're coming off the turn and the closers are kind of in the middle of the turn, losing ground while running wide, trying to pick off horses. So you see those best races really coming at that short stretch mile distance there for Pat's Property. And yes, the horse did win at Hawthorne last June too. So he's a very legitimate racehorse, but I just don't know if he's that much of a standout to be on the front end.
No, absolutely. And, you know, and especially to be, you know, if you like him, you're going to like him at most likely a pretty low price. You have him listed at 5-2. I could even see him dropping below that. Third choice, Jim, anyone else you want to touch on?
Yeah, look to the outside, the 8, Jeff the Lion. This is the other Michelle Boyce runner that we talked about, the other Michelle Boyce horse, who is the Illinois bred horse. But look at the race 3 back. That was a race in the Polar Expedition in the last year where the horse beat Read the Cliff Notes, or sorry, that was Bialia, beat Read the Cliff Notes. Sorry, comes out of that same race there. But then the race 2 back, you come out of that same race with Bialia, who's in here. But that was a race where the horse made a little bit of a middle move and then kind of flattened out in the lane, but then improved again in that last out. And I think Jeff the Lion just kind of progressing in the spot here. But if you get Ardenwood and Pat's Property hooking up on the front end, I think Jeff the Lion's one of those that can run on late. Bialia, as you see there, is a horse that's definitely worth a look too, just based off those recent starts. That's a 2-horse here. But I don't know if this race is as much of a standout for Pat's Property as it looks on paper. I do think there's some other legitimate racehorses in here.
No, absolutely. And actually, I find it really interesting that Bialia's Steve Manley now.
Yeah.
I used to know back in the day, and they all continue to switch. I mean, you see, read the Cliff Notes, and Jeff Deland are now 9 years old, which doesn't surprise me by any means, considering how much they used to run or they still run in the Midwest, of course, but how much I remember them running back at Arlington and Hawthorne when I started getting into Illinois racing. But this is definitely an interesting race, because if you don't see Pat's Property on the front end like Timeform does, that opens the door for a lot of horses like Bialia, like Read the Cliff Notes and stuff like that. So definitely a really nice race. And I like that condition that you guys have that allows those Illinois breds to run for a little bit higher claim, because as you said, they're not as prominent as they used to be.
Right.
So definitely makes a whole ton of sense. But Jim, let's keep going here. Race number 8, $5,000 claimer, going a mile and the 16th. That for 3-year-olds and up have not won a race in 2024 or never won 3 races. Field of 9. And who'd you have morning line favorite here? And I recognize definitely a couple in this race as well.
Man, crazy tough race. I laid the 9 First Masamoon as the 3-1 morning line choice. The 3 Diamond Dave at 7-2 second choice. 2 Flying Samurai at 9-2 is the third choice. And I don't love any of the horses in here by any means. This is a wildly tough race. 9-horse field. I wouldn't fault you if you went to any horse in here. First Masamoon has been pretty consistent in those recent starts, but I think you can actually beat the horse. The horse I actually liked on top was on the inside. That's the one, Not Very Gentle.
Yeah, and Not Very Gentle in this race. I'll go to him next, Jim, and I'll let you keep talking, because Not Very Gentle is the number. Is he? Oh, yeah, he's all the way to the rail. That's correct. Yep. Another John Haran horse who we talked about, coming out of kind of very similar conditions, but again, last year definitely had numbers to boot in these races, and hopefully, progressing off these little bit of layoffs, hopefully he can bring it back to those last year numbers.
And that's kind of the thing. He has to get back to those numbers from last year. He's been good over the Hawthorne track throughout the course of his career, 13 of 20 on the board at Hawthorne. You have that mud race where he was well beaten there and finishing second, beaten 12 lengths. The races have just been kind of weird that he's come out of. There hasn't been a ton of early pace. There hasn't been a ton to run into. And his style is kind of get something to chase, right back and come running at him late. So I have to just kind of see how things unfold. I think Flying Samurai's forwardly placed. Wildwood's Warrior is forwardly placed. Heliochrome maybe rates close a little bit too. And I think Not Very Gentle hopefully just gets that trip where he can sit back early on and then try to come running at him late. You see right there, he's probably going to be rating back last, but should be able to save ground much of the way, and hopefully he can pick off horses. I laid him at 8-1 in the morning line.
Yeah, and again, a great price for a race that definitely looks to set up for him. You see the time form denotes fast pace with the 2 and 8 up front. And those definitely Flying Samurai is one of the horses laid, as you touched on, laid pretty low on the morning line. But horses like Flashing Richie, who hasn't really shown too much this year. Another one that likes to come flying late. Diamond Dave, another one exactly like that same trip. Again, has numbers to boot last year, and actually this is his first race for Vance Childers off of that said layoff. So you're obviously betting on that he'll be ready. But Jim, like you said, a lot of these horses that you touched on are going to be lower on the morning line, are going to be towards that front. So if you think that it's going to develop into a fast pace, you're almost guaranteed to get a pretty nice price on these closers.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, that you have the opportunity to just try to kind of catch a price here late in the day, not knowing how the track's going to play, but knowing that this could just be kind of a fall apart type of race. So you're going to sit out there and see maybe a horse that just gets the hot barn, gets the hot rider, saves ground much of the way, and can come running at him late. That's kind of what I'm hoping for. They go out there, duke it out on the front end, and things just kind of fall apart in the stretch.
Yep, and I know you liked Not Very Gentle on top at 8-1. Anyone else that you want to touch on for your top 3 before we move on?
The only other one that maybe you want to touch on is the 4. That's Blooming Garden. Blooming Garden, if you're just looking for a little bit of a price, I'll probably put that horse second or third in here. He's a lot like Not Very Gentle. He hasn't been that good this year. You get back to some of the races last summer at Hawthorne, he put some races together that you could say, okay, maybe he'll be competitive, but The interesting thing is those races also, he was out on the lead. So again, I'm just kind of curious to see what they do pace scenario wise. If he can maybe stalk the pace, maybe he can run on late. But you get Manny Giles, who's been riding this horse the whole way through for a barn that's been pretty good. So Blooming Garden, I laid a 15-1 in the morning line. I think you'll get every bit of that.
Then that's exactly what people love to hear, Jim. They love to hear those 15-1s for sure. But anyway, Jim, let's go on to the last race. And this is another turf race here, running a mile with another very big field. Is Hawthorne. And Jim, I'm not trying just because you're here, but Hawthorne's done a very good job of carting these races to get these bigger fields. And as the Equine Edge guys touched on earlier, they love some Hawthorne with their low takeout. Big fields, low takeout. It's what everyone wants nowadays, and you're getting it at Hawthorne. So, and with this last race, there's definitely no short of that.
And 12% win, play, show, takeout on each and every race at Hawthorne each and every day. It does make a difference. Field size has been good. We're up almost a starter per race this year compared to last. So that's been one of the things that have benefited us. And then also, the way I card races, I like to put the bigger fields later in the day as the East Coast tracks are finishing up. You get a little bit more of that spotlight there later in the day. So bigger fields for that late pick 4. We've added a late pick 5, which is already at a carryover at one point in the meet. So worth jumping into for sure. But yeah, when you can get a couple turf races, you get a nice mix of races too. But it's nice to see, okay, the turf's filling, a lower level claiming race is filling, but then you get an optional 50 that fills well too. It's just a nice mixture of races to combine for the late pick 4.
No, absolutely. So, and then, like I mentioned, a field of 10, 2 MTOs to the outside with the number 11 and the number 12. Jim, where's your morning line kind of land on this one?
The 2 Monster on the Midway is the horse that I laid as a 7-2 favorite. Chris Block, Orlando Mojica, a horse that just kind of figures off that last out. The 6 Professor Higgins I laid at 4-1, and then the 7 Gluckstadt laid at 5-1, and that's a horse that'll be a little bit intriguing going back to the turf. But Monster on the Midway has been the most consistent runner in the field on the grass. Again, it's Chris Block. It's Orlando Mojica. The horse has some tactical speed. Shouldn't be too far out of it at any point. Last couple races were good, but I like that last start coming off the lengthy layoff. Ran a really solid race. Soul Coaxing's a good racehorse. Sailing Solo's been a very good racehorse throughout the course of his career. Monster on the Midway was right there. He was beating less than a length when all was said and done. And that was a day when the turf was very, very firm on June the 15th. Nobody was closing ground late, and I think that flatters this performance a little bit too.
No, absolutely. And, people see it going from the claiming level to that allowance level. It might be, people saying a nice, step up in class, but these numbers in here, this 78, I love seeing the progressively increasing buyers and now coming back to basically, a little bit up, but mainly the same condition with a lot of these horses coming from that type of claiming level. I think he makes a ton of sense in this race for sure.
Yeah, and he does it. And you have some horses that are going back, trying the turf. You have some horses that are stretching out. So there's not quite as many that are just right at this level, the allowance type level on the grass. You get horses that are kind of trying things. He's one of them too. But again, it's a solid turf trainer. You get a guy who's riding extremely well on the meet in Orlando Mojica. I think the horse just made a whole lot of sense in here.
No, absolutely. Jim, second, third choice. Feel free to keep going. Where'd you end up landing second and third?
The 8 Man on Attack is a horse that's really intriguing to me, and it's all because of that last race, because that last race kind of came out of nowhere. We talked to Vance Childers about that race in the Bucks Boy and said, hey, give your horse a shot in there if you're considering it, because it's a shorter field. Yes, you have a graded stakes winner and another mystery in that spot. You have some other really good race horses in there. But then all of a sudden, Man on Attack that day goes out there, makes the top over yielding course, backs things down, and then was all heart late in the lane, went on to finish second, was beaten only 3/4 of a length when all was said and done. But the one thing this race really is lacking, Kyle, is a whole lot of early pace. So I think you learned something about the horse in that last out. I think this is a horse that's going to go out there and should be able to rate close to the pace in here. So we'll see kind of how things unfold. They have codenamed the Sprinter that's stretching out, kind of making the top, which makes complete sense in here. I think Man on Attack is actually the one that's kind of settling second in this race and just kind of stalking the Sprinter in that spot and then trying to go after them in the lane.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Jim, the one thing that I like about this one is 3 times this horse is routed on the Hawthorne turf course.
Yeah.
One of them just rating right off the lead, 2 of them right on the lead, and all 3 of them have been very good buyers, and very good placings as well. 84 last race. Definitely by far the top. Last top was 70, but still, even 70s are not necessarily too far out of it in this race. And if he can run back to anything like that 84, definitely one to keep in mind for sure.
Yeah, definitely worth keeping in mind in here. And again, you have the unknown of the 4 code name who's going to go out there, the sprinter that's kind of stretching out to go 2 turns. Code name's a very legitimate racehorse, well sprinting. You have to see what you get, because you see that 1 mile race at Laurel Park around 2 turns. That was a race where, yeah, they went out on the front end, kind of gave way a little bit in the lane again against solid company. But it's one of those things where I think these are the 2 that are out there. And again, the Hawthorne turf holds speed very well. They could go out there and potentially even run 1-2 the whole way around with Monster on the midway, having to try to wear him down.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a race that, even though there's a couple of horses that want to go for the lead, some horses will take back. They like to have a target in front of them, and that leaves horses like the Chris Block Runner Monster on the midway, who's going to come from a little bit more out of it to kind of make up that ground. When we look through it, everything but these last 2 races. When he's won, he's had pace to run into. He's had 46-2 at Hawthorne for his last win at a 15 at a lower level even. So now having to continuously step up and not run into so much pace definitely could be a problem for a horse that's most likely going to be favored in the spot.
Yeah, I do expect that he's favored in here. It's going to come down to a little bit of a rider's race. Orlando Mojica placing the horse in the right spot. I think Man on Attack is just going to be a one pace, go out there, try to make the top. Codename, you get Chris Amy, who's the all-time leading rider at Hawthorne. He knows how to ride the turf. He knows how to ride pace. He'll maybe let things kind of dictate in front of him and see how things unfold. So it's a very intriguing race for the finale.
Yeah, and a top rider on the Bettin N Boozin show for sure. We all love Chris Amy, as a lot of us grew up me and Charlie grew up in the Chicago area. So that's that. Honestly, if you want to talk about rider of my childhood, it's Chris.
Yep.
That's Chris Amy is probably easily number 1 on that list. So like we said, like Equine Edge has been posting in the chat, like I've touched on, or is the Hawthorne product. Again, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic betting product. These later races, especially with big fields, very competitive races as well. Like I said, that last race there was a 7-2 morning line favorite.
Yep.
You said, Jim.
Yep.
The race before that was something very similar. Very good betting. And if you're betting those horses to win with good value, you're going to get low takeout, Jim, as well.
And that's the thing about it. And then what you see too is just when you look through our multi-race wagers, all you have to do is really beat 1 or 2 favorites, and you're going to get a nice return because people spread. And like I said, your pools on the later wagers, the late pick 4 especially, so much larger than the early pick 4, just because all those East Coast tracks are finishing off. A lot more eyes come on the signal as well.
No, definitely. And, and I've done it from experience, especially in Howard as well, playing these late pick 4s, late pick 5s. Like you said, you just need to beat one of those favorites, because a lot of these favorites, especially in the first 2 races, will go off at lower prices. If you can beat those horses, exponentially increases the pick 5 for sure, especially with very competitive races at the end.
Yeah, and the one thing that we've seen at Hawthorne and that I really like is just we do allow for those carryovers. If pick 4 isn't hit, it carries over. So early to early, late to late. But now that we've added a late pick 5 too, if that carries over, it goes to the late pick 5 the following day, and we're going to have a 10 race card on Sunday when we draw it tomorrow. So maybe you get lucky and can catch a little bit of a carryover and then get that bonus money on Sunday.
Absolutely, my friend. And like I said, thank you for coming on. As always, appreciate it. And cheers to you, of course. This is Bettin N Boozin. Cheers to you.
That's right.
My friend. I appreciate, obviously, bringing the drinks on. You got to have a little more fun on here than Picks and Ponies, which is a little bit more, hardcore.
Howard doesn't let me drink.
I'll let you come on and drink anytime, Jim, for me. We'll have a bunch of fun on here. But yeah, Chris Walsh says, Hawthorne Jim provides excellent content reviewing these races.
Thanks,
Howard
Chris.
Jumps in, says, agree. Jim does amazing work and a lot of it. And that's definitely for sure. But obviously, a jack of all trades over at Hawthorne Racecourse. But everyone appreciates all of it. For my co-host earlier, guys, thank you guys all so much for watching. It's been an absolute ton of fun reviewing the Indiana Derby card and all 8 stakes that they have on Saturday, and the great my Wi-Fi cut out, Jim. You were hosting the show for a little bit. How about that?
That's why I toasted. It's Bettin N Boozin. I figured I'll go out there and toast to close it out. Howard was all upset. He said that I couldn't drink on his show, but now I can. So that was nice of him.
Sorry, I apologize, Jim. I kind of threw you under the bus there for a little bit.
I don't mind. I'm used to it. I can host you. You name it, Kyle. I'll take over for you, buddy.
Let's do it, man. I love it. But thanks again, Jim. Thanks again, everyone out there. And again, for my co-host earlier, Charlie Freeman, Noah Maher, for the director of racing at Hawthorne Racers, Jim Miller. This has been Kyle Roscoe in episode 89 of Bettin N Boozin here on the HHH Racing Podcast. And until next time, everybody, crush those bets, win those photos, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you in the next one. Have a great night.